Hello, everyone, and welcome to our KNIME software release webinar. We're here today to give you a little bit of an insight into the latest KNIME release and us developers talking about the features that we have there, and then also give you a little bit of an outlook of what we're developing in for the next release. And then at the end, we'll give you the option to ask questions and open the stage for a Q&A session where we even invite our CTO, Bernd. And actually, before we looked a little bit at the registrants here for the session today, we saw that a lot of people have been part of the KNIME community before, which is really cool. Maybe you've even tried out the new release already, or you've posted feedback on the forum. Thank you very much for that. And if you're a newcomer, happy to have you here. And because we thought we'll have only developers on stage today, you also have to deal with me guiding you through the session. I'm Carsten, software engineer at KNIME, live from the Constant Studio. So let me tackle a little bit of housekeeping first. So in this streaming platform that you're using, it works best with Chrome and Firefox. So if you experience any problems, maybe switch to those browsers. If you have any other problems, maybe try refreshing your browser or checking the cookie settings. Try a private browser window. And well, we've all endured enough of a pandemic now, I guess, to be able to connect to a proper Wi-Fi connection. But if you have problems, maybe try using a wired connection. And if you get lost on the streaming platform, there's this stage button on the left-hand side. Whenever you click there, you will see the live stream again. And this is also important because when you're on this stage window, on the right-hand side, there's a chat where all of you can interact. And then, because I mentioned the Q&A, there's a Q&A tab where you can answer, you can ask your questions, and at the end we'll answer all of those, or we'll try to. Okay, that being said, the agenda for today is that I'll start with the improvements on the Python side, and I'm happy that Greg Landrum is joining me. And then Daniel will give you an overview over the modern UI UX features in the new KNIME release, and Adrian will show you other enhancements and extensions that are in KNIME. And at the end, we'll have the Q&A session as promised, and then we'll have Adrian, Daniel, Bernd, and me answering your questions. So let's dive into it. For the Python side, what we have added is actually two things. One is a very useful feature for all of you who are getting into scripting Python in KNIME. Because what we've added is that we ship a bundled Python installation now. So you can look at the preference page here that we have added, Python Labs preference page, and that works together with the Python script labs node. So you have to install this Python Labs integration extension. And then it ships a bundle environment. If that is selected, which is the default, if you have never used that before, then that means you can start scripting Python in KNIME out of the box. So if you have this code, you can immediately execute it without having to fiddle with any Python configuration. This makes it a lot more user-friendly for the beginners, and for everybody else, we still have all of the features in there that you had before. And the other cool thing that we've added is the option to write your own Python nodes. So you can develop node extensions for KNIME in Python now. And so I have an instance of or two instances of a partial least squares node here, which is a feature that is actually has been requested by you, the community, multiple times. And so now with this Python node extension option, it's really easy to implement that yourself. So for the two top nodes here, simple PLS regression learner and predictor, actually the whole code that make up these two nodes is this little bit more than 100 lines of code. And it's actually really easy. You can define a category in which the nodes show up. You see that here, it's the PLS regression category. And you can then write a learner node. You need to use those decorators here to specify that this is what the node name and what node type and so on, and which category it is. And by other decorators, you specify the input and output ports. Now you see this has an input table and an output binary port, which you can see here on the left-hand side. And then you can easily specify parameters. Like here, you want to select multiple columns for features, for targets, and also the number of components, which is an int. And then this generates this dialog for you where you can select the features and select the targets and configure the number of components. And actually, this is controlled by a flow variable. If you have tried that before, this also works with the new Python nodes. And the execution of training the training a partial least squares model is actually just those 2 lines of code because we're using scikit-learn. And it's really cool that you don't need a lot of boilerplate code anymore to actually get that to work. And then the same thing holds for a predictor node where you get the table, you have the model as input, and then you actually just concatenate the predictions to the input table, and that's what you get out here. Now, the one other cool thing maybe worthwhile mentioning is that it's really easy to develop in here because I could, for instance, say, I want to set a warning from this code. And if you're developing those nodes, you can specify a setting which allows you to that the code is basically reloaded on every execution. So now if I want to execute that predictor node, it should show me a warning. Let me just do that. Oh, and here is my warning. Oops. Oh, yeah, and I even forgot the S. But yeah, let's get back so it doesn't look too broken. And so you see, it's really quick to make edits in your code and actually run this again in KNIME, and there's no Eclipse involved if that is something you're concerned about. But now those 2 nodes here are like the quick and easy way to get something working. If you want to make this a full-fledged node, as you know from other KNIME nodes, you actually need a lot of information inside the node description, and also in the dialogues, you would expect a little bit more help filling in all of that info, and also some checking that the selected inputs are actually valid for the algorithm that you're running, and so on. So here would be the implementation of a full-fledged version that actually does a lot more error checking and has a little bit more documentation in there, but it's still not that much code that you actually have to do to develop these kind of Python nodes. All right, that's what I wanted to show in terms of nodes, and that's we really hope that this is not only, so we enjoy developing nodes with that very much, but I hope that is also true for you guys. And one other person who has been eagerly waiting for this to be available is Greg Landrum. He's a senior scientist at ETH Zurich and a longtime advocate and advisor of KNIME, and also he's a developer of RDKit, a widely used chem informatics library, and I'm really happy that Greg is joining me today to answer a few questions. Hi, Greg. How's it going?
Hey, Carsten. Things are going well. I guess it's not as hot here as it is there.
Yeah, it's pretty hot here. Yeah. So what do you expect from the new Python, or the possibility to write nodes in Python in KNIME?
I mean, I'm really excited about this. So any improvements in the way that we can use Python from KNIME makes me very happy. It's something we've been pushing for a long time, and it's great to see it happening. I'm really, really enthusiastic about finally being able to write nodes purely in Python. You mentioned no Eclipse, and that's just music to my ears. As most of you developers KNIME developers know, I'm not a Java person. And it makes me really nervous and unhappy anytime I have to use Java to write KNIME nodes for the RDKit. So I'm really, really psyched that we're going to be able to do some RDKit nodes in Python so I can start writing nodes again. I've already seen some prototypes of work that the life sciences team at KNIME has done on RDKit nodes, and it's really looking good. So this is going to be really, really good for the community. And thanks. I'm looking forward to playing with it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, so just to give you a glimpse of what we're doing next, actually, we are working on better type support for all those Python nodes, because that's exactly needed for the chem informatics side, adding the data types that you need for molecules and, well, whatever. We also have, for instance, geospatial nodes in the pipeline. And we know that we have some problems with date and time formats. They are always a problem on KNIME and on Python side and on Pandas side. So this is something we're working on. And the other thing that well, we have to admit is that the scripting editor in KNIME is not like state of the art. So actually, we're finally working on having a modern editor inside KNIME. So it will hopefully be a breeze to write Python scripts as well in the Python scripting node again.
That's great. That's really cool because, as you said, the editor is functional, but little more than that. So that's really, really cool. I'm psyched.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Greg. Thanks for joining.
Thanks.
And speaking about modernizing the looks or the feel of the scripting editor, this brings us to the next section where Daniel will talk about the modern UI improvements in KNIME. So Daniel, hey, how's it going?
Hey, Carsten. Good, good.
Can you give us a tour of the new modern UI?
Yes, of course. So today I want to walk you through the changes that we've recently made to our UI. And there are two large features we're currently working on. So one is the modernization of our UI of the analytics platform itself. And the other thing is like the modernization of our visualization nodes. Just a small notice here. So we've decided to release both of these features already very early to get your feedback as early as possible. And thanks to our great community, this worked out pretty nicely. So we've already received lots of feedback, which either helped us or will help us in the future to improve the product even further. So definitely keep that coming, look into the forum, and also try out the new things and report back to us on what you think of it. Okay, but enough on that. So you can see I've already opened a KNIME workflow, and it's a very basic one. So I only have a data generator and the 4 new visualization nodes. But before we dive into the visualization nodes, let's just look what that looks like in a new UI. So after you've installed the KNIME Modern UI extension, you have this button here on the top right. You can just press, and you will directly switch to the new UI. So you can also switch back and forth if you want or need to. And I think this personally looks way better already. But we based all of these decisions we made to come to this point here on the feedback you guys gave us. And one important thing that was popping up over and over again was that the node monitor was not as present as it needed to be. So, I mean, the node monitor is one of the central pieces because you should always keep track of your data and also your transformations. So we made this a central piece in the new modern UI now. And you will always have this at the bottom, and you can see all of the output ports and also the flow variables. There are, of course, lots of other improvements for the modern UI, and I don't really have that much time. So if you want to know all of the details, just look into the forum thread or watch the release video. But I want to show you one other feature I really, really enjoy. And this is like the setup of components. So if you now have a node and you just right-click and create component as used before, then you've created a component. But what is now very, very nicely is to edit this component. So once you want to change the title, for example, you can just simply double-click into the title and rename this component. And it's as easy as that. So now you've renamed the component. But one other thing that is even more important is like the adding of input and output ports. So previously you had to right-click and go into a setup dialog, and the team made it really easy now to add these ports. So you have these 2 plus icons here, and once you click them, a search bar opens. And then you have a list of the most used port types here, or you can just search for your custom port type, and you add it, and that's already it. Everything you need to do in order to add input or output ports. This is very nice already. And if we're looking to what is coming next, so I could add it already now, but the problem is removing is not possible at the moment. So this is definitely something we're already working on and want to release as soon as possible then, of course. Another thing that was also brought up by the community quite a lot is actually workflow annotations. So if you had workflow annotations in the current UI, then you will see them in the new UI, but it is not possible to edit them. So this is definitely something we want to tackle soon then. Okay, but this was only one of the 2 cool features we released, but there's also the modern visualization nodes. And these are the 4 nodes we currently released. So let's look on what actually changed. So previously, when we observed people how they used our visualization nodes, we saw that they were often bouncing between the configuration panel and the actual visualization to see if the changes they made to the configuration are like the results they actually wanted. And we changed this now. So if you now open the scatter plot, for example, you have a preview of the actual view directly next to the dialog options. And if you now change one of these options, you will see this change directly reflected inside the view. So this will make it much easier and faster, hopefully, to get you to the point where you actually want your visualization to be. This, of course, works for all of the options here. And if you don't believe me, just try it out yourself and give us feedback. Okay, but this was only one thing that we improved. Another thing that we saw was that the node description was not always at the position where you actually needed them. So if you clicked on a node previously, you had a panel on the right side telling you the node description, or this little question mark icon, which you can click and you would get like a complete list of all the node descriptions. And then if you still had to search for the corresponding element, for example, for this title element. But I mean, you're actually having this component here already. So we now introduce this little question mark icon directly next to the options you actually needed to. And if you click it, then you will get the description of what this field is actually for. And I mean, of course, for the title, this doesn't really make sense because most of you know what a title is for, but we have way more complex settings options for which it makes it very, very easy now to understand what they're for, hopefully. Okay, this is, of course, only the beginning of our visualization nodes. So we're currently already working on improving these 4 nodes we're having here, and of course, also adding additional nodes then with future releases. Our main focus currently is to enhance the table view. So the table view is a very minimal version right now, but what we missed was like the possibility to filter and search. So we added this functionality here now in my development environment, and you can see that I can directly already filter down, for example, only to see cluster 2, or I can also use the search. And this is one of the improvements we've already done to the table and are eager to get out to you guys. But another thing that was also reported heavily in the forum was that you want the ability to see images or other things than just text or numbers in here. And this is, of course, very important. So if you, for example, have a molecule string in here, you not only want to see like the molecule string itself, but it would be nice if you could just change it to be also or render an image so that you can see the actual molecule instead of this text. And this is something we're currently working on and hopefully can release that quite soon so that you can try it out and give us feedback if that is already sufficient. So for the next 2 nodes that we're currently working on, it will be the pie chart and also the histogram node, which will come next. Okay, and as soon as we have something that you can try out or use or play around with, we will definitely post this in the forum and update the thread. You can then try it out and hopefully will give us feedback on what you guys are missing or if the improvements are good or not. So please keep an eye on that and keep us updated if you like it or not. And with that, thank you, and back to you, Carsten.
Thanks, Daniel. That looks really great. And it's also, I find it so cool that everybody can try that out now at the click of a button, just switch to the modern UI. That's really, really nice. Hope we get more good feedback on that. Okay, enough of Shiny UI. Let's bring Adrian on the stage now, who has a few other functional extensions to KNIME in store. Adrian, hey, how's it going?
Hello, Carsten. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I've brought quite a few improvements that we made, so let's dive right in. My first workflow here is showing some changes that we made in terms of our database framework and also some changes to the SharePoint online list support that we have. But let me start with the database enhancements. For those of you who are new to the KNIME Analytics Platform, the database framework is a framework that allows you to create SQL queries using nodes in KNIME. So you just kind of drag and drop your nodes into your workflow and you build an SQL query that is then run on the database. So it's not run inside of your analytics platform, but you push it back to the database to run it there, which usually is much more efficient. So for the databases, we have 2 categories of improvements. One is in terms of our connector nodes. There we, for example, improved the support for Oracle databases, and we can now also connect to Azure Synapse Serverless and dedicated SQL pools, which can be quite handy if you have those services set up for your company. The other kind of improvements we have are new nodes. I brought 2 of them here in this workflow. The first one is the DB concatenate node, which acts very similar to how our concatenate node in KNIME works. So in KNIME, you concatenate 2 tables, but here we actually concatenate 2 queries basically. But you can also add more input tables here or ports by just using the dynamic port feature, which can be quite handy to combine multiple queries together without bloating your workflow too much. The second node I would like to show you is the DB looping node. And this one is significant because it marks the final transition of our legacy database nodes to the new or to the current database framework. And this means that in an upcoming release, we will probably deprecate the existing or the legacy framework so that you only have one database framework to choose from. Of course, your workflows will still work, but nonetheless, now is still the perfect time to switch all workflows over that still use the legacy nodes, because with the current framework, you get all of the enhancements and also many more databases that are supported by the framework. All right. Then we move over quickly to the SharePoint nodes. So in the last release, we already introduced the SharePoint Online List Reader node that allows you to read SharePoint lists. And now we have two more nodes, one utility node to delete any SharePoint online lists that you might have on your server, and then also the SharePoint Online List Writer that allows you to create new lists or overwrite lists as well. All right, that's the first workflow. Then let's jump in straight into the second one. This one is still partially in the realm of databases, but it also introduces some machine learning with the H2O integration. H2O is a machine learning library with which you can build very powerful machine learning models that you then usually want to apply to some data. And the cool thing about this new feature here, the Snowflake H2O Mojo predictor, is that you can now train your model locally with H2O and then push that into the database using this node. So instead of SQL, you actually push the whole model into the database and can run it there. This, of course, only works for the Snowflake database. This is, well, not generally supported by all databases, but Snowflake supports it. So we thought that would be a very handy feature if you get Snowflake set up for your company. The next workflow is now no longer with databases. This is just plain old analytics platform. And it is about the XGBoost integration, which we kind of gave a major overhaul in the last release cycle. We moved it out of the labs category, so you can now find it under analytics and no longer in the labs category. And we added a bunch of cool new features, two of which I want to show you here. The first one is the possibility to assign weights to your rows for training. So you can say, okay, this row is more important than that row. And the other cool thing is that you can now check out the feature importance output here on the learner node. In this particular workflow, I use XGBoost to train a classifier, a sentiment classifier on a movie review data set. And the catch here is that these reviews are very imbalanced in terms of their class distribution. So we have many more negative reviews than we have positive ones. And this, of course, will affect our model when we train it. So in order to counterbalance this, we will actually tell the model to weight positive reviews higher or more than negative reviews. And to show you that this actually makes a difference, I'll also train an unweighted model where all rows essentially have the same impact on the model for training. And if we check out or compare those two classifiers with the binary classification inspector, then we will see that there are actually some differences. And here the blue one is actually the unweighted model. So here all rows have the same impact. And it seems to have a higher accuracy, but you have to keep in mind this accuracy doesn't care about the class distribution. And you would actually have a 90% accuracy if you would always say that the review is negative, because 90% of the reviews in the training set at least were negative. If we actually look at the balanced accuracy, then we see that the green model that uses the weights is more powerful because it just performs better. And if you look at the sensitivity, this becomes even more clear. It's maybe also important to note that row weights are one application. This unbalanced data sets are one application for row weights, but you could also think of other ones. But now let's quickly also look into the feature importance. So if we open up the second output of the learner node, then we get an importance, or actually multiple metrics for every single feature. If you have a missing value here, this just indicates that this feature wasn't actually used by the model at all. So for example, this could be used to do some feature reduction if you wanted to. And then if we sort this descending, so the most important feature is on top, then we can also do some fact checking for our model, whether it makes sense what it does. And in this case, it says, okay, worst, the word worst is a strong indicator for sentiment. And the same goes for terrible or stupid or perfect, which kind of makes sense, right? So this is kind of a small glimpse into the black box that the XGBoost model would be otherwise. And now, last but not least, we have 2 improvements to the column expressions node that are mostly motivated by community feedback. So thank you for providing us with it. The first improvement is in terms of the kind of data types that you can handle with the column expressions node. So in general, the column expressions node is kind of the Swiss Army knife of the analytics platform because you can do numerical formulas, you can do operations on strings, and now you can also do operations on path columns. So for example, you could change a file name easily with the column expressions node. The second improvement is that you can do now multi-row formulas. And to show you how this actually works, we have here a data set that consists of minimum daily temperatures over a certain amount of time. And of course, those deviate quite a bit from day to day. But maybe you want to kind of look at the seasonality of the data. And for that, we want to smooth out the day-to-day differences. And here we can actually do this very easily with the column expressions node now, because we have this new syntax where you can just say, okay, I want the value of column temp, but 1 row above the current row or 1 row below or 2 rows, and so on and so forth. And you can also use that in more complex expressions using, for example, a for loop here. The catch with this is that you have to enable it in the advanced tab and set a window size so that you so that we know how many rows you need essentially to perform the expression for a single row, which is kind of located in the middle of those. And you also have to specify how it should behave on the boundary. So in the first and the last row, where there are no previous or succeeding rows. But this is really quite useful. Of course, you could have done that before as well by just using a lag column node, a multiple math formula node, or column expression nodes, but you would have had to use many more of these nodes, and now you can actually do it very easily within 1 or 2 nodes, like you can see here. And this is kind of the outcome of this. So the greenish line is the actual data, and then we have the other 2 lines, which is the smooth data, and becomes even more evident, the smoothing, if you look at the derivatives, so the kind of day-to-day differences between those following days in the data set. And that's all from my side, and I'll hand back to Carsten. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. That's really cool. And it's also nice to hear that we've used all of the community feedback and actually improved the column expression node there. Okay, everyone, that's actually what we wanted to present today. And now we'll get into the Q&A session. And as promised, we'll bring Bernd, our CTO, on stage, and also get Adrian and Daniel join as well. All right. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining the Q&A session. And let's see what questions we have. OK. The first one, oh, it sounds like a tough one. Will it be possible to set the Python setup through KNIME Server customization profiles so that AP users' workflows with Python will always work on the server? I don't know enough about server customization profiles. Maybe you have to help me out, Bernd, whether we can do that, actually.
Yeah. No, I think the short answer is that there are 2 truths. So the server naturally supports server managed customization, and also the future products that we are developing I'd also like to point your attention to a node which is called the conda environment propagation node that allows you to kind of freeze the environment that you use for execution in the workflow, and then ship that environment or the definition of the environment with the workflow, and that then so that it runs in the same definition, the same settings, the same packages also on the server. I don't know if you have an example workflow, or if you can just quickly go on to the hub and point that, show the workflow.
Yeah, I think there are,
and it's
for that node, sorry, for that node, there's a lot of examples on the hub where you can actually, search for the node and search for workflows that use that node, and there's quite a bunch that show how to do that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. The next question is, will Exasol database ever be supported with the new database nodes? I don't know, is that for Bernd or Adrian?
The answer is maybe. So I don't know that particular database. What our database integration offers is seamless integration with every standard database that's supporting, which has JDBC drivers. For many of the very prominent and publicly used databases, we ship the drivers natively. Exasol is, I think it's a specialized database also for analytics and memory and optimized. There are many. So I assume they also provide those kind of drivers, which I have not tested it. But I guess that will also work for querying the data from the database and writing to the database. It's important to note that our database integration doesn't process or does the execution within the analytics platform or the client, but pushes the execution and the actual querying to the database, because this is what they were optimized for. There are some specialized databases. We saw already Snowflake briefly, which is more than just a database. And there are others also, Teradata, that we have specialized integrations that offer more functionality, that potentially also offer Spark execution. If there is public demand, then we consider that. But so far, the answer is maybe. It's currently not prioritized.
Okay, thanks.
But Carsten mentioned it already. Maybe one more note. KNIME is open source and extensible, so this is also a community event. We have plenty of pointers, and all our code is public. So maybe also approach the vendor to provide an integration with KNIME.
Yeah, maybe there's a Python interface for that database, and then you can use the Python nodes. Okay, next question. Do the new views already allow interactive features like selection? And do they work together with the old selections? Daniel, that's one for you.
Yes, and the answer is yes and no. So they absolutely support selection already. So between these 4 new nodes, you can select, and you will see it in the other nodes as usual, but they do not work with the current JavaScript nodes. So it's a different interaction we invented here or implemented here, and it is based on the highlighting for the old KNIME users. So this is now compatible. So you can use it with the old highlighting, but it's does not work now with the JavaScript selection.
Okay, thanks.
I see a comment by the person who asked that question on the Exasol connection, Kodrin is his name, and he claims that database outperforms other popular new competitors, and I think depending on what competitor you go, they claim the same. No, but thanks for the question. And he also confirms that data querying is already working using the standard libraries. So that's good to hear. Thanks for finishing and following up on that.
Very good. Thank you. So the next question is, what's next for modern UI UX?
Yeah, so that as already mentioned, so for the new UI for the analytics platform itself, we will definitely work on adding ports and removing ports. I mean, adding is possible already. And then workflow annotations will be one of the bigger next topics we will tackle. And for the views, as already mentioned, we of course want to get as much nodes out there as possible, but the two next nodes will be the bar chart and the histogram node, and we'll also work on all sorts of quality of life improvements and little things we've just not done yet.
Yeah, maybe also a quick comment on that one. So the new modern UI has this shortcut which brings you to a forum. And when we developed that, there was a question, where should this go to? Is that a single thread? Is it a whole forum? It's kind of the public space where people can comment, give feedback, etc. There's a very long and lengthy thread now on the KNIME forum where people give very, very constructive feedback and also ask for certain capabilities that exist in the old editor that are missing in the new editor. They also discover new functionality that only exists in one place. And as Daniel already pointed out, we need to catch up with the relevant functionality from the old editor, like these annotations and port adding, etc. But there are also some new tricks that we add that make editing and creating workflows much easier and more enjoyable. But never ignoring like what is relevant, what do we need to do in order to support creating workflows like we did also in the old editor, in the classic editor. We call it classic.
Okay, thanks, Bernd. Okay, maybe we have a longer question here. I'll start reading it and we can take that bit by bit. So, hi, I have some basic questions for most of your audience here. We're trying to switch from Excel to KNIME to stop manually doing graphs aggregations for our clients on a daily basis. So, besides your certification program, what's the best way to get a thorough overview of the features KNIME offers? Is there any book someone new to KNIME could go through? I mean, next to the certification program, yeah, we do have those courses, and I think there are multiple books, right, that you can look at.
Including one that is just on going from Excel to KNIME and going. I mean, usually what people do, it depends on the person who wants to adopt KNIME and kind of the how you approach to learn new things. Some people just go straight in and poke around with the software and learn by examples. Others prefer to use books, follow the steps in there. We also have good cheat sheets that you find on our webpage just to get an overview, and often you also learn just by example. And then there are these self-paced courses which kind of do this more in a there's a certain pattern that you follow and you make sure that you don't miss the important parts. And then there are also a couple of books that bring you from Excel or Tool ABC to KNIME.
Yeah, and if you want to play around with some challenges, we have challenges posted where you can try experimenting with KNIME and competing against others. If that's more the style you learn, there's a broad variety of things you can do.
And in this, also in this session here, we mostly talk about what's new in the analytics platform and this open source piece. There's also the hub, which is something that we only covered briefly, or you actually, I didn't. But there are plenty of examples, not only coming from us, but also from the community. And you search, you find relevant examples, and you learn by them. And there's a nice integration in KNIME itself, and there's also the hub.knime.com, which is the same place, or not?
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Any known issues on 4.6 which will be fixed with 4.6.1, and when will it come? I guess we all have something that we can add there. For the Python node extensions, obviously, what I've just shown, this is a very new feature. It's still in labs, which means it's not ready for production yet. So if you play around with that, we definitely know some problems. Like if you did not connect an input table, then it'll show a weird error message in the dialog. Or if you edit the code and then work on the open the dialog again in KNIME, then sometimes because the setting was never in the node before, it could cause problems and so on. So we're fixing those small issues in the Python side, and maybe, I don't know, hand over to Bernd for other things.
You know the dates also.
Yeah, for the date, yes.
I mean, if you have a particular problem, then it's good to either ask here, and people probably they're moderating will point you to the forum, or raise a problem in the forum, or if you're a KNIME customer, you just reach out to support@knime.com. Everything that we are aware of, there are workarounds available, and also, for instance, one example is that in some circumstances, the installer on Windows is lacking certain files, which only happens if you have virtual machines, and there are like those problems. Here's a typo, and there's a problem with the Python nodes. So there are a few smallish problems, and this will be addressed. And we plan to have a 4.6.1 release in the next 3 weeks or so, probably less. It's always asking developers to confirm dates as always, but there is a certain date, and it's in less than 3 weeks.
All right, thanks, Bernd. Okay, the next question is there a way to create Excel or Power BI visualizations in KNIME? I only found Java visualizations which aren't as appealing. So maybe Daniel?
Okay, yeah, that's a tough one, I guess. I mean, there's not a way that I know of to import Excel visualizations, but correct me if I'm wrong, Bernd. But I mean, with the new visualization nodes, we hope to tackle at least that problem. So our visualization should now look nice. And if you don't think so, then please get in contact with me, and we can definitely find out what the problem is. I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to tackle with the new visualization nodes. But there are also other nodes out there already which should look way better, which are like the JavaScript nodes and the Plotly nodes. So just try out whatever fits you best. And if you have any suggestion for the new visualizations, I'm happy to reach out to me and we can get in contact.
Yeah, I guess what makes sense is to, on the one side, look for different KNIME features that provide different visualizations, because I don't think they're all installed by default, especially the ones Daniel is talking about, you have to install. And yeah, if you want to give that feedback to us, then join the KNIME forum and let Daniel know. I guess that's also a very good way to see what other people already suggested and then chime in there. That would be great. Thanks. Okay. Next question is, setting preferences for Python scripting is now very different. All reference to Anaconda seem to be removed. I cannot get Python to work. Any suggestions? Actually, yes, we have split up the preference page for Python into 3 different ones. There is a Conda preference page. Maybe, can I actually open up my screen sharing again? I can just show that. I'll just do that. So if you look at the preferences page, there is this Conda preference page, which you can use to specify the path to your Conda environment. And that will be used inside the Python preference page, which is the one that you were using up to this release. And this new, and obviously if you have to set this Conda button here, and then it also points you to the Conda preference page. And for the Python script labs node, you also have this bundled option, but if you switch to Conda, then again, it will use the settings from this Conda preference page. So that's exactly why we actually split this up, so that you only have to set Conda once, but you can use it in different Python preference pages. I hope that helps. Okay, thanks. Okay. Maybe one for Adrian here. Instead of row weights in XGBoost, wouldn't it be easier to provide weights for the classes instead?
Well, for this particular use case, yes, might be easier. I mean, you have to calculate the weights anyway, and you can just use a joiner, for example, to attach them to every single row, and then it's equivalent. But the cool thing about row weights is, and I already kind of teased that during the presentation, is that you can also use them for different kind of tasks. Because if you say you weight classes, then this means that this only works for those groups that are defined by the class. But you might, for example, have a minority group in your data that has a certain requires a bit of an upsampling to be better represented in your data, but it is not necessarily the class itself. And this actually becomes also interesting if you're looking at things like ethical machine learning, where you try to kind of balance out these biases that you might have in your data set. And there you could use, for example, the row weights to assign more weight to data points or groups in your data that would otherwise be underrepresented in the data set, but that are not kind of directly the class. Or you could use it, for example, to enforce a cost matrix on your losses, when it's far worse to misclassify one class than another one.
Mm. All right. Then other questions are, can Python node extensions be shared via the hub? And that's a very good question. We actually prepared pretty much for doing so, but we don't have all of the infrastructure set up in a way that you can use it directly. So while you can already build your Python node extensions locally and actually package them into an update site, these instructions are in our tutorial. We do have a pretty extensive tutorial on our documentation site already. And this locally built update site you can share with your friends and colleagues and install the nodes from there. But actually, to get that to the hub, we'll follow a similar pattern as we had for Java node extensions as well. So you basically need to let us know where the code for your extension is, and then we'll add that to a community Jenkins, which builds the extension, and then at the end it'll show up on the hub at some point. Yeah, but we'll release the information on how to do that very soon. Okay. Any plans for box and whisker plots for visualization nodes, Daniel?
Yes, definitely. So we have a list for the plots to come next, and the box plot is, I think, very high on that list. For the whiskers plot, I guess that makes a lot of sense, but I need to check back and then can update in the forum. But yeah, both plots definitely very valid, and at some point we will work on them. And think for the box plot, it's earlier than later, but yeah.
Okay, cool. And is it possible directly to debug the Python code while the workflow is running in this environment? Actually, yes, you can simply attach a debugger to the Python process. And I think in our documentation, we specify how you can do that with debug.py, so the debugger that is used inside a Visual Studio Code. So it's basically just adding 3 lines of code inside your Python code, then trigger the node execution, and then you can attach a debugger to, and then you can attach Visual Studio to actually look into all the variables that are in your Python code. And that's actually a very, very nice way of working with the Python nodes, yes. Okay. Daniel, do you already provide a way to get images out of the views?
No, not yet. We have that definitely on our list, and I think this was heavily requested, and a lot of people want that, but we just didn't make it yet. But this is something we're currently investigating and trying to find a solution for it.
Okay.
I mean, there is an image, save image option in the view itself, but it's
yes, that's correct.
We want to automate it.
Yeah. So if you just want to download an image of your view and want to have it, for example, in your presentation or whatever, then every view has the possibility that you can download an image out of it, but you cannot just directly use it to process it.
Yeah, the automation part, which KNIME is very strong at.
Yeah. Okay. Two more questions. So do you have an estimation when 80% of the nodes are available in the modern UI?
Daniel.
I mean, I guess the question is what part, right? Because you can use them.
Yeah,
but the question is on the nodes.
Exactly. I think what they're talking about is probably the dialogues. And if you look through our hub, then you can see that there are many, many nodes. So this will definitely take some time. But for the estimate, I need to give that back to Bernd.
So what you've seen already, what Carsten showed, I mean, these projects that we work on, they somehow are all connected. And the configuration dialogues that are shown in the Python, the new Python node, the Python-backed nodes, and also the charting nodes that Daniel showed, they have a different type of configuration dialogue. And many nodes in the KNIME Analytics platform have very primitive and simple nodes. And we are working on providing the capability to rework these configuration dialogues. And then there are nodes which are more tricky, like the file reader and the group by, etc., and where you have something visual that require some more attention. What we are also working on, and where we have a prototype, is some stopgap solution where we will be able to, once we go fully browser. I mean, this is maybe also was a point about the KNIME Analytics platform and the demo that Daniel gave. And once, for instance, you can use a new UI from the hub. Once we go to the hub, we are also working on some technology that allows us to bring up the old configuration, the old implementation of the configuration dialogues in the browser. But that is kind of, we are currently exploring, and there's no commitment. And for what you currently saw in the demo that Daniel gave, that's all in the analytics platform, the product that you download, that you start on your laptop or whatever you use, bring up the UI, you can go and work with the single workflow and open the configuration dialog of any node that you have, be it a KNIME node, a node that we provide, or one from the community, or the node that you wrote yourself. So, but it's very hard to lay out the plan of when is it that there is 80% is done and 100% is done. We have a list of, we know which nodes are often used in conjunction, and we also know which ones to approach first.
And I mean, because KNIME is open source and the community can add nodes, the question is when they will switch to the new UI. So we can't promise to convert 100% by ourselves, I guess. Yeah. Okay, one more question I see here is you mentioned geospatial types. Is KNIME planning to support geospatial analytics? And yeah, well, that's also something that benefits from the Python node extensions, because I don't know exactly how much we can how much I'm allowed to share, but we have partners working on geospatial, and we've been working on a data type inside KNIME to make that more of a first-class citizen, and also we added this type support for the Python side, and now it's really easy because there are great libraries in Python to do geospatial analysis, and now it's easy to add this functionality to KNIME by building Python nodes, and that's really cool and something to look forward to. Okay, it looks like there are no more questions. So do you guys want to add anything? Okay, looks like no. Then thank you very much for joining. Thanks, Bernd, Daniel, Adrian, for helping me out with the Q&A today. And thank you all for chiming in and listening, and I hope that was insightful. And as always, exactly, we would like if you follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter, look at the videos we have on KNIME TV, on our KNIME TV channel on YouTube, If you have any more questions that you didn't ask today or that come up later on, please look at the forum and ask a question there. If you're looking for examples, want to share any components, go to the hub. There is a large variety of things you can find and contribute yourself. And obviously, if you want to try out all the features that we've mentioned today, then download the latest version of KNIME. With that, thanks again. See you next time. Bye-bye.